The house had always felt like a world unto itself, a place where time slowed down and the echoes of the past whispered through the halls. For as long as I could remember, this mansion had been more than just a residence. It was a living testament to our family's history. Yet now, it felt like a prison, a silent observer of the unraveling that was taking place inside it. My name is Emily Waters, and for the past several months, I had been the one to care for my grandmother, Eleanor, in her final days. Grandma Eleanor was everything to me. She had raised me with such love and wisdom, a constant in a life that had often felt uncertain. Her elegant presence filled the house, from the grand foyer to the intricate woodwork that adorned every room. I had always cherished my time here, playing in the garden, running up and down the stairs, and listening to her stories of our family's past. But now, as the cancer ravaged her body, those memories became harder to hold on to, slipping through my fingers like sand. The woman who had once been so vibrant and full of life was now nothing more than a fragile shell, tethered to the house by a thread that grew thinner with each passing day. It wasn't just the house that had changed. My family had changed too. More specifically, my sister Sarah had. We had never been close, but there was always a mutual understanding between us, an unspoken bond of sisterhood. That bond had started to unravel long ago, but it wasn't until these recent months that I began to understand just how far apart we had drifted. I had always been the one who stayed behind, the one who chose to nurture my creativity and write, even if it didn't seem to have the same weight as Sarah's tangible accomplishments. Sarah, on the other hand, had embraced the world of real estate, the world of wealth and power. Her ambition had always been her defining trait. She hadn't really cared about our family's history or the mansion's significance. She hadn't cared for the stories embedded in every room or the quiet moments spent in Grandma's study, sipping tea and talking about life. No, Sarah cared only for what was tangible: money, power, and the lifestyle those things could buy. So, when Grandma's health began to decline, I knew that Sarah's interest in the mansion had very little to do with family ties. It was all about what she stood to inherit. I tried not to let my suspicions grow. After all, Sarah had never been overtly malicious in her actions. She was simply pragmatic. But I began to notice something disturbing. During the rare visits she made to the house, when the doctors and nurses were gone, when Grandma had settled into a nap or was too weak to be alert, Sarah would stay behind. She would slip away into the study, meeting with the lawyers who came in and out of the house like they were part of the furniture. At first, I tried to dismiss it. Sarah had always been good with business, and maybe she was just helping with some legal matters. But there was something about her demeanor, something cold and calculating that made me uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but as the weeks went on, it became undeniable. Sarah wasn't here for Grandma. She was here for the money, the inheritance, the family fortune. And I knew deep down that she was scheming to make sure that fortune would end up in her hands. I wasn't naive. I knew that the house and everything in it, our grandfather's successful manufacturing business, the investment portfolio that had grown into a sprawling empire, would eventually pass on. Grandma had always spoken about the legacy she and Grandpa had worked so hard to build, and she had always promised me that it would be shared equally between us. But as I watched Sarah and the lawyers talk, something about the way they moved, how Sarah seemed to have an uncanny understanding of the legal jargon, how her cold smile never reached her eyes, it made my stomach twist. There were moments, too, when I caught her speaking to Grandma, pretending to offer comfort. But I could see through it. I could see that she wasn't just there to visit. She was there to lay the groundwork for what she wanted. Everything. But I wasn't just going to let it happen. I had been raised to respect the family's legacy, to protect it, to honor it, and I would not let Sarah's ambition tear it apart. So I kept my distance, observed quietly, and bided my time. I knew that if anything was going to change, I would have to be smart about it. Then came the day when it all became too clear. I had been sitting with Grandma, holding her hand, reading aloud from one of her favorite novels when I heard Sarah's voice. It was muffled at first, but it grew clearer as she entered the room. She was speaking to someone on the phone, and I immediately felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something about the tone in her voice that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the voice of a daughter worried about her mother. It was the voice of someone who was laying out a plan. "Everything's going according to plan," Sarah said, her words sharp and deliberate. "Once she signs the papers, we'll be done with all of this. Just a matter of time." I didn't need to hear more. I knew exactly what she was talking about. The will. She was talking about the will and how Grandma had been coerced into changing it. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked out of the room, trying to keep my composure. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I had been around long enough to know how manipulation worked, and I could see it unfolding right before my eyes. I knew Sarah was taking advantage of Grandma's illness, but hearing her speak so openly about it, the coldness in her voice, was enough to send a wave of anger through me. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not when Grandma was so vulnerable. I had to be careful, strategic. If I were to stop Sarah, I had to do it in a way that wouldn't hurt Grandma more than she already was. I needed proof. Proof that Sarah had manipulated Grandma, and proof that she was stealing the inheritance meant to be shared equally between us. So I began to watch more closely, taking note of every conversation, every moment Sarah spent alone with the lawyers, every document signed in Grandma's presence. I became methodical in my observations. I couldn't afford to miss a single detail. The mansion felt different now. It felt colder, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the tension, the greed that seemed to seep from every corner. It wasn't just the house. It was the family. It was the history, the memories of my childhood, now tainted by the revelation that someone I had once called my sister was willing to destroy everything for her own gain. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The house, the history, the legacy, all of it meant something to me. And I wasn't going to let Sarah, with her sharp business mind and her manipulative ways, tear it apart. It was time to take action. The truth would come to light, and I would make sure of it, no matter what it took. The first step was already clear. Find the letter. Find the truth Grandma had left behind. I had to find it before it was too late. Before Sarah could get her hands on everything. Before the mansion, our family's history, and the legacy I had spent my life cherishing slipped away into the hands of someone who had never understood what it truly meant. The game had just begun. The days seemed to stretch on endlessly, each one heavier than the last. I found myself constantly on edge, my mind racing with thoughts of Sarah's manipulation, the lawyers, and the unspoken tension in every room of the house. But as much as I tried to keep my focus on caring for Grandma, I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore what was happening around me. The mansion, with all its grandeur and history, had become a battlefield. The walls that once echoed with laughter and stories now whispered of betrayal and secrets. I knew I had to act quickly. My grandmother's health was deteriorating faster than I had anticipated, and I could feel time slipping away with every passing day. I had seen the subtle signs of Sarah's influence. The way she would smile politely, her voice laced with sugary sweetness when she spoke to Grandma. But behind her eyes, there was something colder. The lawyers, the bank representatives, all of them would arrive at odd hours, always when Grandma was too weak to fully comprehend what was happening. I didn't know for sure if Sarah was pushing Grandma to change the will, but the gut feeling I had was undeniable. Every inch of my being told me that something wasn't right. One evening, after Grandma had fallen asleep, I made my way to her study. The room had always been her sanctuary. Quiet, warm, filled with old books and photographs that told the story of our family. It had been a place of refuge for her, a place where she could reflect on the past and perhaps find comfort in the memories that had defined her life. Now, as I stepped into the room, it felt different. The familiar scent of leather-bound books and aged wood was overshadowed by an unsettling feeling. The study, which had once felt like a safe haven, now felt like a place of secrets, of things better left undiscovered. I stood in front of her desk for a moment, running my fingers along the edge of the worn wood. I had always admired the way Grandma had kept everything so meticulously organized. Her papers, her letters, her journals. It was as if she had always known that one day, someone would need to find the truth. And now, I was that someone. The letter she had mentioned to me weeks earlier, the one she had hinted at with those cryptic words about the blue room and the lighthouse painting, haunted me. I had thought it might have been a dream or a passing comment made in her delirium, but now, standing there in the quiet study, I realized it had been more than that. She had been trying to tell me something important, something vital. It wasn't just a passing whim. It was a message meant for me to find, and it was buried somewhere in this room. I moved to the bookshelf at the far end of the study, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of what I was about to do felt immense. What if I uncovered something that would change everything? What if Sarah had already covered her tracks too well? But I couldn't stop now. I needed answers. For Grandma. For myself. For the legacy that had been threatened by my sister's greed. As I searched through the shelves, pulling down old family albums and dusty books, I found nothing but memories. Photos of Grandma and Grandpa, wedding pictures, moments frozen in time. But there was something else. A small, unmarked envelope tucked between two photo frames, nearly hidden from view. I picked it up, the delicate paper feeling strangely heavy in my hands. This was it. I could feel it in my bones. I carefully opened the envelope, my hands trembling with anticipation. Inside, there was a letter, just as Grandma had described, and a small brass key. The letter was written in her elegant script, and the words inside were enough to send a shockwave through my entire body. Emily, my dear, the letter began, the familiar warmth of her handwriting bringing a sense of comfort in the midst of all the turmoil. If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I have always believed in the strength and integrity of our family, but I fear that someone among us has lost their way. Sarah, in particular, has become driven by a hunger for wealth and power that I can no longer ignore. I have watched her manipulate situations to her advantage, and I fear she may do so again. But I want you to know, Emily, that I have prepared for this. I have safeguarded our family's future, and I have left the key to it in your hands. My eyes raced across the paper, my heart pounding with each word I read. The letter continued, outlining how Sarah had used her charm and manipulation to gain control of family matters, especially as Grandma's health began to decline. It spoke of conversations that had been held in secret, meetings with lawyers and bankers, all designed to shift the family wealth into Sarah's hands. But what struck me the hardest were the final words of the letter. I have moved some of our family's wealth to an offshore account, one that cannot be easily traced. I did this to protect our legacy from being squandered. The key enclosed will open the safety deposit box where all the records of this account are kept. You must be cautious, Emily, for Sarah will not stop until she has everything. You are the last line of defense. Do not let her destroy what your grandfather and I built. The letter shook me to my core. I had always known that Grandma was a woman of strength, but I had never fully appreciated the extent of her foresight. She had known what was coming. She had known that Sarah's ambition would one day lead her to betray the very foundation of our family. But what she hadn't known was just how far Sarah was willing to go to get what she wanted. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The weight of responsibility had suddenly become unbearably heavy. Grandma had trusted me with the key to protecting the family legacy. She had left me the means to expose Sarah's lies, to stop her from taking everything for herself. But now I faced the daunting task of finding the safety deposit box and the documents that could prove Sarah's deception. The key, small and unassuming, seemed to pulse with significance. I couldn't help but wonder what lay behind that locked door. What would I find in that hidden account? What other secrets had Grandma kept hidden from the world? But there was no time to waste. Every second counted. The key in my hand felt like a lifeline, the last thread connecting me to the truth. I couldn't afford to hesitate, not when everything was at stake. I knew what I had to do. I slipped the letter back into the envelope, tucking it safely into my jacket pocket, and made my way out of the study. The night was dark, the house eerily silent, and the mansion felt colder now, as if it, too, was holding its breath. I had to move quickly. I had to find that safety deposit box, uncover the truth, and protect what was rightfully ours. But as I walked through the halls, the weight of Grandma's words echoed in my mind. You are the last line of defense. It was up to me now. The battle had begun, and I was determined to fight for what my family had built, no matter the cost. The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows, and I was going to find it. I had never been more aware of the silence in the mansion than I was that night. The heavy curtains were drawn, but even the darkened windows couldn't block the chill that seemed to have settled in the air, thick with the weight of secrets. Everything about the house felt different now. The house that had once echoed with laughter and warmth now felt like a mausoleum, a place of confinement, as though it had become a witness to something it couldn't undo. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. With every hour that passed, Sarah's grip on the family's legacy tightened. I had learned so much in the past few days, things that left me both shaken and resolute. Grandma's letter, the key, the hidden accounts. All of it pointed to a truth I could no longer ignore. Sarah had already manipulated everything around her, using Grandma's frailty to her advantage. It wasn't just the inheritance she was after. It was control. Complete and total control over everything that mattered to our family. I had watched as she manipulated, lied, and schemed her way through the corridors of our family's history. But now, I was determined to expose her for who she really was. I stood in the hallway, feeling the weight of Grandma's words press down on me. "You are the last line of defense." The thought kept replaying in my mind as I walked through the house. I had to confront Sarah. I knew that much. But I couldn't do it until I had the proof. The proof that would undo everything she'd worked so hard to manipulate. The key in my pocket felt like the only thing standing between me and the truth. It wasn't just a key to a safety deposit box. It was a key to everything. The truth, the family legacy, and the justice that had been denied for so long. I had been careful. Every step I had taken had been calculated, deliberate. I had watched Sarah carefully, observed every word she said, every move she made. The coldness of her ambition was something I had seen before, but never this far. She had turned our family into a game, and she was playing it for keeps. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not after everything Grandma and Grandpa had built. The night felt like it was moving too fast. I had spent days preparing, planning, and now, everything was coming to a head. I was ready. I had no choice but to confront Sarah and everything she had done. But there was something inside me. A quiet voice, a sense of dread, that told me this wouldn't be easy. If Sarah had truly gone as far as I suspected, then the confrontation would be a battle, one that would force me to fight for more than just the inheritance. I would be fighting for my family's legacy, for the truth. I made my way toward the blue room. Grandma had mentioned it in her letter. She had spoken of it in passing, as if it was a place that held the answers. The blue room had always been off limits, a private space where Grandma had spent hours in thought, where she would write her letters, keep her journals, and protect her most treasured belongings. It was the last place Sarah would expect me to go. It had always been a sacred space, but now it was more than that. It was the key to unlocking everything. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The room was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the antique furniture. It felt as though the room was holding its breath, waiting for something. As I stepped inside, I could almost feel Grandma's presence, as though she were still there, watching over me. The room was familiar, yet strange. It was filled with items from the past. Books, photographs, a desk with carefully arranged papers, and of course, the lighthouse painting. I stood in front of it, my heart pounding in my chest. The painting had always been a fixture in this room, a constant that Grandma had kept for as long as I could remember. It was more than just a painting. It was a symbol of guidance, of the past and of the future. It was always there, watching over us. Now it felt like the key to everything. I reached for the painting, my fingers trembling as I moved it slightly to the side, just as Grandma had shown me in her letter. Behind it was a small safe embedded into the wall. I could hear the sound of my own breath, ragged and shallow, as I took a step closer. The key. I pulled it from my pocket, its cold surface a stark contrast to the warmth of my hand. It was heavier than I remembered, as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. I inserted it into the lock, and with a soft click, the safe creaked open. I couldn't help but hold my breath as I lifted the door. Inside, there were several neatly stacked files and documents, all of which were bound together with a leather strap. My hands shook as I pulled the first folder from the safe. The papers inside were yellowed with age, the handwriting unmistakable. Grandma had kept meticulous records of everything, every decision, every move made, every investment. But it was the last folder, the one that was tucked at the very back of the safe, that made my heart stop. It contained detailed bank statements, account numbers, and transaction records. Everything I needed to expose Sarah's betrayal. But it wasn't just the financial documents that caught my attention. No, it was the letter that was tucked at the very back of the folder. A letter that Grandma had written herself. The letter was addressed to me. I read it aloud, though the words seemed to stick in my throat, the weight of them suffocating me with each sentence. Emily, it began. If you are reading this, then you have already uncovered the truth. Sarah has done more than manipulate our family. She has done more than just seize control of what was rightfully ours. She has betrayed us all. The wealth that we've built, the business that your grandfather and I worked so hard to create, is now at risk of being lost. But you must know that this was always meant to be protected. I have hidden the truth from everyone, even Sarah, because I knew this day would come. You are the only one who can save it now. My hands tightened around the letter as I read on. The words that followed were damning. Grandma had known. She had known exactly what Sarah had been planning all along, and she had taken steps to protect the family's wealth, moving it to accounts that Sarah had never known about, accounts that Sarah would never be able to touch. But as I read the final lines, I realized the gravity of what Grandma had left me. Sarah believes she has won. She believes that the game is over, but she is wrong. The real power lies in the truth, and the truth is yours to uncover. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of Grandma's final words wash over me. She had trusted me. She had believed that I would be the one to protect everything that mattered. I was the one who would fight for the legacy that Sarah sought to destroy. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the safe now closed, the key still in my hand. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, as though the room had suddenly become too small, too suffocating. The moment had come. I had what I needed. The truth was now in my hands, and I would do whatever it took to make sure Sarah never got away with what she had done. The battle was far from over, but now I was ready. I was ready to confront Sarah, to confront the lies she had spun and the empire she had built on betrayal. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth fighting forever is. And this was worth every ounce of energy I had. I left the blue room, the door creaking behind me as I stepped out into the hallway. The house, which had once felt like a fortress, now felt like a battlefield, and I was prepared to fight. For Grandma, for the legacy, for the truth, and for my family. The game had begun, and this time I was the one who would win. The truth had a way of surfacing, and now that it had, there was no going back. As the final chapter of this story unfolds, we find Emily standing at the crossroads of legacy, justice, and family. She had always lived in the shadow of her sister, Sarah, different in their ambitions, their choices, and their desires. Emily, a writer, had always lived in a world of her own, creating stories that explored the human condition, while Sarah sought success in the concrete world of real estate and wealth. Their paths diverged long ago, but they always remained tied together by the mansion and the family that had built it. Yet, as their grandmother Eleanor's health began to decline, the mansion became the backdrop for a battle that would unravel their family's history, secrets, and future. The confrontation between Emily and Sarah was inevitable. Emily had spent months trying to piece together the fragments of the past, uncovering evidence of Sarah's manipulations and greed. From secret meetings with lawyers to the manipulation of their grandmother's final wishes, Sarah had stopped at nothing to secure the inheritance and wealth that she believed was her birthright. But Emily, standing as the last line of defense, wasn't willing to let it go. The letters, the key, and the hidden truths left behind by Grandma Eleanor were her weapons, the tools that would expose Sarah for who she truly was. In the end, It wasn't just about the inheritance or the family business. It was about the preservation of truth, integrity, and the legacy of those who came before them. Emily's actions weren't just a matter of reclaiming what was rightfully hers. They were about ensuring that her family's values weren't lost to the greed and manipulation that had plagued her sister. As she uncovered the truth, Emily realized that the mansion wasn't just a place of memories, it was a symbol of everything they stood for. It represented the sacrifices, the hard work, and the love that had built the empire their grandparents had passed on to them. But the truth didn't come easy. Emily had to fight for it. Through every moment of doubt, fear, and tension, it wasn't until she discovered the final pieces of the puzzle, the hidden accounts and the carefully preserved documents, that she was able to confront Sarah and expose the depth of her betrayal. But even as Sarah's plans unraveled, Emily remained focused on one thing: restoring balance to the family, honoring the legacy of their grandparents, and ensuring that the truth would prevail. When the final confrontation took place, Emily stood firm. Despite Sarah's attempts to manipulate her, despite the pressures and the danger of confronting someone so consumed by greed, Emily remained steadfast. She wasn't just defending the wealth or the property, she was defending her family's honor. She was standing up for the values that had been passed down through generations. It was in this moment that Emily truly realized her own strength. She had always been the quiet one, the observer, but now she was the protector of the family's future. As Sarah was arrested and the family's fortune was secured, Emily emerged not just as the victor, but as the guardian of the family's legacy. The mansion, now no longer a place of fear and manipulation, was restored to its rightful place as a symbol of the values their grandparents had built it upon. Emily made sure that the wealth would be used for the greater good, creating charitable foundations and preserving the family's history through careful stewardship. But even more than that, she had learned the most valuable lesson of all: that true strength doesn't come from wealth or power. It comes from standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. The journey had been difficult, but in the end, Emily had learned that the power to change the course of her family's future lay in her hands. The key to everything had been within her reach all along. It was her courage, her integrity, and her unshakable belief in the truth that had ultimately saved the day. By staying true to herself and refusing to let greed and corruption dictate her path, Emily had ensured that the legacy of her grandparents would live on, not just in their wealth, but in the values they had instilled in her. And now, Emily was ready to start a new chapter. The mansion no longer felt like a prison, but a place of hope and renewal. The house that had once felt so oppressive was now a place of potential, a place where the future would be shaped, not by manipulation and deceit, but by love, truth, and the will to protect what truly mattered. From Emily's journey, we can draw profound lessons about the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity, of never compromising our values for the sake of convenience or personal gain. The story is a reminder that no matter the circumstances, the truth will always find a way to come to light. Even when it seems like the world is stacked against us, when others try to manipulate or control the narrative, we have the power to change the course of our own story. We can choose to fight for what is right, for what we believe in, and for those who came before us. This story is also a reminder that wealth, power, and status are fleeting, but integrity, family, and the pursuit of truth are what truly define a person. In a world that often values material success above all else, it's easy to forget what really matters. But Emily's journey shows us that it is our actions, our choices, and our commitment to doing what's right that leave a lasting impact. We all face challenges in life, moments when we must choose between doing what is easy and doing what is right. It's easy to be tempted by shortcuts, to take the path that promises the most reward with the least resistance. But true fulfillment comes not from the easy choices, but from the difficult ones, the ones that require us to dig deep, to stand firm, and to fight for what we believe in. No matter how hard it is, always choose the path of integrity. Don't be afraid to confront the difficult truths, even when it means going against those who seem to hold more power than you. Whether it's your family, your values, or your work, protect what is meaningful to you. Don't let anyone manipulate or take away what you've worked hard for. In today's world, truth often seems elusive, and it's tempting to bend or ignore it to get ahead. But the truth always finds a way to come to light. Stand firm in your belief in honesty and integrity, even when it's difficult. Like Emily, you may feel like the quiet one, the observer, or the one who doesn't have the loudest voice in the room. But remember, true strength isn't about being the loudest or the most powerful. It's about staying true to who you are, standing up for what's right, and having the courage to fight for what matters. If you've enjoyed this story and the powerful lessons it teaches, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything and motivates us to continue creating content that inspires and encourages. There's so much more to come. And with your help, we can continue to share stories that not only entertain, but also leave a lasting impact. Thank you for being part of this journey, and stay tuned for more amazing content.